Well, welcome. We are up to session 5 of the Anything But Ordinary 2026 Winter Bible Studies. And we've been working our way through the stories in the middle to latter part of Genesis. In the chapter before what we're looking at tonight, we're looking at chapter 29, but in chapter 28, Isaac calls Jacob, blesses him, and said to him, "Do not marry one of the Canaanite women. Go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as a wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother." So all the way back to Padan, not in Canaan, which becomes Israel, but all the way up north, back towards Babylon. So we have in this passage the story of two marriages. He does not marry just one of the daughters of Laban. He, in the end, as you have no doubt read, marries both of the daughters of Laban. And he eventually has children with both of them, as the chart below shows. And he also has relationships, whilst married to these two women, with the servants, the maidservants of each of them, Zilpah and Zilpah, who was Leah's servant, and Bilhah, who was Rachel's servant. And he has children with them as well. So we have the sum total of the 12 boys who are listed there, and the one who didn't make it onto this pretty diagram, Dinah, the daughter. We don't know if she was the only daughter because, as you know, men get much more of a featuring role in biblical stories than women. And we know about Dinah because of an incident later on in.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Was Zilpah and Bilhah actually servants or slaves? Because it wouldn't have been a consensual relationship, would it?
Hmm.
They were probably slaves.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was very much do as I say. And it's do as I say for each of the daughters too, in terms of their father, as we find it. Not that they were servants. I thought it would be good, given this story about multiple marriages and multiple relationships and multiple children, and given what we know about Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, and what we know about many other figures in Genesis in terms of marriages, to start off with this question that people often talk about today. You hear certain people loudly talking about biblical marriage. What does this passage contribute to? Oh, sorry. How would you define biblical marriage? What does this passage contribute to that understanding? And what other marriages of biblical characters might be relevant as you think about biblical marriage?
Biblical marriage. How do you define it?
Where the father gives the daughter away.
So there's dowries and bride prices, and the father makes a decision. So, yeah.
Wasn't that coloured by the way they all lived, whether they were biblical or not? I mean, they're
It's
The
a
culture of the
contract.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, culture.
It's a product of their time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting how you hear, especially some people, especially evangelicals, talk about biblical marriage meaning one man, one woman forever, no divorce. The man's the boss.
Genesis
Yeah,
doesn't work that
but
way.
like people have extrapolated this and imagined it out of their own to fit their own narrative.
Mm.
Yes.
And that's the if you say biblical marriage to a random member of the community, that's probably what they're going to think of, not a transfer of property.
Yeah. Depends on, I guess, who you ask. A lot of
Yeah.
people will tell you that they're aware of polygamy, for instance,
Yeah.
which isn't one man and one woman, and they know that much about it.
Mm.
Well, that's really what was going on there, wasn't it? Because he had two wives and two sex slaves or concubines or whatever you want to call them. And the women weren't having relationships with other men
No,
That we know of.
that we know of. Yeah.
I doubt if they were, Pat, because one, what other men?
Yeah.
And secondly, how would you do that without being found out and stoned? It would be a real risk.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that if we're going to talk about biblical marriage, I would imagine that the meaning of marriage changed through the millenniums. So it's not just like if we say biblical marriage, it's not just one type.
You would just say that a biblical marriage is a marriage that is recorded in the Bible.
Yep, that'd be a pretty sensible definition, Bill. Unfortunately, no one adopts it.
There's no impact on our understanding of marriage in this century.
But
No.
also the wives gave their slaves to their husbands. You know, both Leah and Rachel told their husbands to sleep with their slaves.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, you know, Hannah did that with, you know, all of them, but it's the women, the wives that have sent the slaves into their husbands.
Mostly they do it when they're barren, like Sarah
Yes.
does it with Hagar, because
Hagar,
she can't
yes.
conceive children. With Leah and Rachel, it's a one-upmanship.
Yep.
You know, if it looks like Rachel's going to have one more son, then Leah decides she'll add to her sons to make sure she's got the most sons. Yeah.
There must have been some men that never got married at all during that time. If other men went round having multiple partners, there must have been some blokes at the bottom of society that never got a look in.
Possibly. It's hard to know.
Mm.
And because the mortality rate was rather high with men because they fought wars.
All right.
That probably kept the population down. So, yes.
Mortality rate would probably be high with women too, with so many dying in childbirth.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, that's how Rachel dies, giving birth to Benjamin. Yeah. We can move on to Leah. So, you know, I think Bill's got the best definition. I'm giving my gold star to him in terms of biblical marriage. So we start off with an introduction saying Leah's eyes were lovely and Rachel was graceful and beautiful. That's how we first meet these two sisters, these daughters of Laban, who figure in this story in the lectionary. And it's a somewhat, I would think, by today's standards, patronising introduction because it probably isn't the way we would introduce a woman nowadays. And judging by a woman by her appearance is probably not a sensible way to proceed, at least in modern days. But the ancient
Leah was supposed to have weak eyes.
Yeah, that's another translation.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the same word, which some translations say weak, some say lovely.
I think part of the issue with Leah is she's got a bit of bad press because there's a bias towards Rachel as the favoured wife and the fact Laban tripped Jacob into marrying Leah. And she's sometimes presented as having two different coloured eyes. And I don't know what the basis for that is other than there's some sort of bias going on about who's the favoured matriarch. So normally we don't talk about people just by the appearance. In fairness, I have to say that the Bible does this with men as well, because David is described as, you know, handsome and ruddy, and other men are also done that. So obviously appearances counted for something, despite what we want to believe. So Jacob has been sent by his father because he doesn't want Jacob marrying a Canaanite woman. So he sent him off to the land of Laban, where his mother's brother and where she lives. And he is to work with Laban and seek a wife among his family. So the land of the people of the east is how it's described in Genesis 29, and Jacob turns up, and early on he indicates his interest in Rachel, who he meets, and he kisses her. And when Rachel then conveys to her father the fact that Jacob has a family connection to them, Laban greets him with joy. Surely you are my bone and flesh, says Laban. And you might expect that from that there's going to be a nice family reunion and lots of honest behaviour will follow. And if you thought that, you must have been disappointed as you kept reading, because Jacob is his mother and his uncle's genetic child, I should think, in his behaviour. And so are his daughters, as it turns out. So it's about who's out triggering and manoeuvring who as the story unfolds. So, citing local customs, Laban claims that giving the younger daughter before the firstborn was something that may not be done in your country, but is certainly done in Laban's. And Laban probably has his own interest to the fore. He doesn't want to marry off a younger daughter to have an older daughter shackled to home as an old maid, as it were. And he wants to make good connections. So he manipulates things, and Jacob is tricked into marrying Leah. Yet it has taken him 7 years to get to this point, and one has to ask why. So John did a bit of digging in this. Do you want to talk about this bit, John?
Yeah, I went onto the website My Jewish Learning, which you can all do. It's got all sorts of interesting short articles written by Jews, particularly Jewish scholars. This particular scholar writing about this is Dr. Christine Henriksen Garraway, who is Associate Professor of Hebrew Bible at the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem, a very good tertiary institution. She says, when a girl's father agreed to a union between a suitor and his daughter, the suitor often did not have the Bryce pride handy, because marriage, of course, is a commercial interfamily transaction. So this may be one reason for the betrothal period. The rabbis had a name for it, calling it erusin. The girl's betrothal to the man made her unavailable to other men, but she still lived with her father until the man paid the full bride price. Of course, we know about an infamous betrothal in the New Testament, don't we? With Mary and Joseph. But here, the idea is the price that's set is work for me for 7 years. And so the daughter lives with the father for the 7 years, while the suitor, the would-be husband, works for the father for those 7 years and then can get married. That explains why Jacob works 7 years whilst he's betrothed to Rachel, and it doesn't explain, because it's Laban's character that has to explain why Laban deceitfully slips Leah into the place of Rachel. And also later on we'll explain the 7 years of working before Jacob actually gets Rachel in the second marriage.
Yes, and Leah must have been complicit in this subterfuge, because she's the one standing there jumping the broom or whatever they did back then to signify that the contract was being fulfilled in marriage. So it's interesting with Jacob, of course, because he's worked 7 years to get the woman he wants, Rachel. He ends up with Leah, and then he's told he's got to work another 7 years to actually earn Rachel as a wife. So I don't know how I'd feel about that if I was Jacob. Would you trust Laban to actually hand over Rachel at the end of the 7 years, or is there going to be some other sort of obligation or catch to this particular arrangement? But as Laban only seems to have had 2 daughters, maybe Jacob felt that he could be trusted on this one, and that Rachel would indeed be given to him on the second time around of his paying this, working off his bride price. So we have some questions for you about Jacob and Leah. How might Leah have felt being the one rejected because, she wasn't the one who was first choice? And how might she have felt? Is she pressured by her father to take part in his scheme and hide her identity from Jacob for the marriage ceremony, whatever form that took? Or was she feeling that as eldest sister, that was her right to actually take part in this ceremony, and the means justified the end? So we're going to put you into your groups to think about this, those questions. So how did you go with those discussion questions? In regards to Leah, how might she have felt and what was going on in these scenes?
Be interesting to know if Leah had another suitor, somebody else that could have been her husband.
I would suggest no, simply because Laban's very, very keen to palm her off onto Jacob.
So maybe she takes this as the opportunity to have a husband and get away from her father.
John also was saying that it's sort of not been that long ago, and maybe even happens now in subcontinental societies, that the man, the father, chooses the husband quite a long time before they're actually married, and it's accepted that the father's choice is the right one. So the patriarchal society still going on.
In fact,
yes, it is.
Kumar, who's not here because he's getting around in Europe.
I think the seeds of hate were well and truly planted in this situation, because for the brothers to contemplate murdering Joseph, but softened it to put him in a slave pit and sell him to slavery, suggests that there was a lot of seeds of hate in this whole situation.
But he was having dreams where they would bow down to him, and he was sharing those lovely dreams with his brothers, which probably didn't feel very affable towards him.
I think you have to take that context into account. Yes, it wasn't going down well with his older brothers, and probably culturally rightly so, as it were.
I mean, I kind of think that normally you'd say, oh, he's a cocky little kid, and not pay too much attention to it if it was a stable family relationship.
Well, nothing's going to be stable when you've got that mix entirely, is it?
Oh, exactly.
But
it laid seeds.
At it through the lens of our century too, Patricia, about what constitutes a stable family relationship and what constitutes a cocky little shit.
True.
Because I think you'll find the hierarchy is much more defined back in this cultural time. And Joseph, as the second youngest, is really usurping some things here by saying this stuff in regard to his parents as well as his brothers.
Yeah.
So the sins of the generations before passed down to the sins of the 10th generation. Hey,
well, that's what it tells us in Deuteronomy.
It may not be. I hope not. Isn't this what you're alluding to, that because of what went on earlier, this has travelled down the generations?
I'm not sure that is the implication here. I mean, Patricia's suggesting that feuding sisters might have affected their children, so they feud with one another. But I think 12 brothers and one daughter could be expected to feud without much help.
Yeah.
Especially
But
when it comes to inheritance and property.
But murder, for them to agree, almost totally agree on murder, and then the older brother says, no, let's sell him to the slave traders. That's not just feuding. There's a heck of a lot of hate in there.
If it was just Rachel who was the one being hated, then you'd expect Benjamin to be involved, and he is not. Joseph has a brother.
But he wasn't. Was he born then?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, because Benjamin was the one who stepped in.
No, Benjamin didn't step in. It was.
He stepped in later, but yeah, he became.
You're spoiling the story, people, for those of us that haven't read to the end of Genesis.
Yeah, right. All right. I'm not sure that. I think that might be a little bit of a blind alley. I think that there is scheming and feuding that's going on, but I mean, there seem to be scheming and feuding in every biblical family. Look at David's children.
Yeah.
They were exactly the same. And as far as I know, none of his wives were feuding. But it's about who has power and who's who in the hierarchy as much as anything else when you're dealing with these cultures. We have to be very careful not to make the mistake of thinking these people are like us in funny clothes. They're not. They're quite different in the way they see the world and experience the world and how they form relationships and contracts and how they relate to their deities, because there's more than one deity, of course, in this story. So if we move on to Rachel, we know Jacob wanted to marry her and he works off his bride price to find himself with Leah. And you might wonder, why is this so? What is going on with Jacob? Well, one, Leah was probably veiled at the time in terms of her wedding. So that could be one thing. The second thing is that Jacob seems rather lascivious in wanting to get his bride into bed with him. And he's very kind command to his new father-in-law is, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. Not hand her over or, give me my bride and I will marry her and love, honour and treasure her. It's give me her so I can take her into the bedroom and have my way with her. So there's different translations of this that we've found here. Jacob the Crass says, may I go into her. The NIV reports saying, give me my wife. I want to make love to her. That is not what the Hebrew says. And the NASB says that I may have relations with her. And the NLT says, so I can sleep with her. So anyway, whatever you want to translate it as, it's obviously driven by the libido of Jacob, who's impatient, who probably takes the wife without looking under the veil. And by the time he's in the bedroom, he finds out he's been deceived. But she does have children, so he obviously does not spurn Leah as a wife. So all through this, I've got in my notes here, Rachel's a bit of a powerless pawn. Well, she is at this point. But even though we're not reading further at the moment, I encourage you to read further, and you find that Rachel is not powerless as we go on. Firstly, she blames Jacob for her childish state, and he says, don't be ridiculous, I'm not God. And then she works magic to get children. After she has children by her slave or servant, then she hires, she bargains with Leah to get mandrake roots, which were thought to be magical herbs of fecundity and fertility and desire. And she says to Leah that she will give Jacob to Leah to spend a night with her. So obviously Rachel has the upper hand, even as the second wife in this relationship. So Leah accepts that and bluntly informs Jacob that she has hired him for the night by giving mandrakes to Rachel. You probably won't find it translated that way, but that's exactly what the Hebrew says. Yeah. She walks out and she says, I have hired you through the mandrakes my son found and that I have given to Leah, to Rachel. And so Jacob says nothing and just spends the night with her, apparently. So he was quite compliant about that. Rachel also steals her father's household gods when they're leaving. When Jacob decides to go, she hides them, the tephilim as they're known, under the saddle of a camel, and then she claims that she has her period, or it is, I am in my time. That is the way of women, which is biblical longhand for saying I have my period and I can't stand up in your presence. So the one place he can't search is where she's got them safely hidden. And you see the sisters there are both on side against their father. They might have their quarrels or squabbles beforehand, but when it comes to leaving Laban, both sisters unite against their father and they stand by Jacob. So they are as one voice. The last thing I want to mention about Rachel, which I found a curiosity, is that when Rachel's servant Bilhah bears Jacob a second son, Rachel says, I have wrestled with my sister and God, and I have prevailed. Does that remind anyone of someone later down the track in Genesis?
Esau and Jacob going to meet Esau, and that's the time that he wrestled with God.
This Jacob, but not when he's going to meet Esau. Who does he wrestle with?
With God at the bottom of the ladder.
God.
The angel or...
Yeah, that's right. And it says there, I've wrestled with God and I have prevailed. Now, the interesting thing I found about this is I could not find a single translation that translates this correctly about Rachel. It's all translated is, I've had a great struggle with my sister and I have won. That is not what the Hebrew says. The Hebrew says, I have wrestled with my sister and God and I have prevailed. All of them leave out and God.
What verse was that one, Elizabeth?
It is verse...
Grab some more tablets.
It is verse 8 in chapter 30. I'm just pointing it out to you because, as you all know from Tuggeranong at least, translation and lack thereof and crook translations is one of my bugbears. And this is about as crook as you can get. So, and God has been removed from this verse. The words have been picked differently to what they're described when Jacob's doing it. Yet Rachel here is doing the same thing as her husband does later on. I find that a literary curiosity, so I'm pointing it out to you because I think it must have significance, or why would it be there? So we have Rachel also wrestles with God and prevails, maybe not quite in the same way because this is over fertility. And the other thing, of course, she must want the mandrakes for is to fall pregnant. That's clearly why they are really important to her. So she takes the mandrakes, presumably does some sort of magic with them, and then it says that God heard Rachel and opened her womb. Now, it doesn't make a direct connection to the mandrakes, but as I said, presumably she's done something with them, some sort of fertility ritual or spell with them. And then later on, we find Jacob putting his stripped saplings in water when Laban's tricked him about the offspring he's supposed to get from the sheep and the goats. Jacob makes these magic rods and puts them in the water troughs, and then all the lambs produce the colours that Laban's agreed he can take with him. And obviously there's some magic going on there. And I thought, well, that's worth pointing out too. So it's not all quite about what God might provide here. God obviously helps those who help themselves, who are doing magic spells with various plant material in these stories. So Rachel obviously grows into her own, and she is as much a master manipulator as her father is, and her husband, I might say. And she manages to do things for herself, but unfortunately dies in childbirth. So we've got some questions about how Rachel might have felt. How might she have felt knowing she was the chosen one is the first question, and then learnt that she would not be able to marry because her father overruled it. And she must have known about this too, because she must have known that Leah would be standing there in that place, not her. So she's party to it as well, but obviously coerced into silence. And remembering that both Rachel and Leah were probably teenagers at this stage. I doubt if they were older than 14, 15, 16 at most. So they're children really in what we would describe, though they're women in the ancient world. So how might she have felt about this, knowing that she was the chosen one, but she wasn't going to be the chosen one in that first ceremony, and that she couldn't marry as she thought and Jacob thought agreed because of her father's ruling. So we'll go back into our groups now and we'll think about some of those things. She certainly gets a revenge on her father, put it that way.
We've just been reading our commentary on Genesis to kind of see what commentators have said about Elizabeth's theory. And one of them agrees entirely with her.
And God's removed because translators just don't want to confuse the issue, and they're making up Rachel's mind for her, and I have a real issue with that.
Yeah, I brought that up too, that we don't actually hear what the women think about it. And, well, first someone said, was it really 7 years? And I suspect not. I think it's symbolic of that was the time that, because seven's the time of completion and fulfillment.
The magic biblical number.
Yeah. So maybe it wasn't actually 7 years. And maybe Rachel wasn't all that keen on him anyway, and she thought, oh, I'll let my sister go first and she can soften him up and teach him how to do as he's told. And by the time I waltz in, like he'll
be trained.
Yeah. Yes. Maybe. I don't know. It's possible.
See, this is how the rabbis get their energy, because they look at it and they say, well, it says this, but what does that mean? And why it doesn't say that? And why does it not say that? And what about if this happened? And what about if that happened? And the next minute you've got 300 different rabbinical points of view stretching over 5 centuries, and you've got a whole discussion going,
Yeah.
Just like this group.
Yeah. I do think it's reasonable to assume that Laban had the last word.
Yeah.
With his daughters.
Yeah.
And the text implies that.
Yeah, we don't get to hear from Leah and Rebecca what they really think. So
Leah and Rachel, no, we don't.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we don't hear from them at all. And they just have to do
as they're told.
As they're told, basically. Yeah. And they seem to get on all right, because they're getting on all right until Rachel gets jealous because she can't have children. And the text tells you that. And that's when she conceives the idea of getting her slave to conceive on her behalf in similar way that Sarah did. So, I mean, it wasn't an easy time for women, but Rachel has her own power. And I think translators removing that she feels that she's wrestled with God and prevailed in the way Jacob will go on to do. I feel that they've taking that away from the text robs her of something of her voice and perspective. And I don't think they should have done that. And translators do this all the time, and it really annoys me. Anyway,
How would that be?
so beware.
All
Learn
right.
languages. Right.
How would that be treated in Jewish scriptures? Like where?
I actually had a look in the Orthodox Jewish Bible, and they've taken it out of that as well, Bill. So, you know, Orthodox Jewish people don't like women having voices either, it would seem. So, yes, which is curious. I would have thought better. And I'm sure if I looked at the Talmud and some other, you know, things from history where the rabbis are commenting, I would find rabbis commenting on that. I haven't looked because I haven't had time to do that. And our house is in uproar with renovations and what seemed like 500 tradesmen here today. But it would be interesting to see what the rabbis have in the Mishnah and Talmud about this particular passage and that particular phrase. But English translators have made that decision for Rachel. Yep. Obviously, we don't want to confuse readers. She was just inferring something as a strengthener of her wrestle with her sister. I say rubbish. I've looked at the Hebrew and you're all full of it, and you're probably all men. But anyway, I digress.
Wouldn't they be all?
We shall move on to Bilhah and Zilpah. Now, they're really no more than names and sort of vessels to conceive Jacob's children in this story. And what we're going to do with Zilpah and Bilhah, this no more than names, is actually a poem from Spill the Beans that wrote about them, and we felt it summed it up really well. Zilpah and Bilhah, no more than names. Who named them? Most likely their father. Why did his girls become slaves in another man's household? What age were they when they became Laban's property? Did they arrive together or apart? Did they grow up with Laban's daughters? How did it feel to be passed on again, given as possessions to Leah and Rachel at their strange double wedding to Jacob? Men dictate their fates, but women have power over them too. Zilpah and Bilhah, surrogate mothers of 4 tribes of Israel. Bilhah's infants become Rachel's sons, Dan and Naphtali, named by Rachel, claimed by Rachel. Zilpah's infants become Leah's sons, Gad and Asher, named by Leah, claimed by Leah. Zilpah, what brought you joy? Did you work hard? Did you miss your parents? Were you allowed to rest when you were pregnant? Were you beautiful or plain, quiet or mischievous? Bilhah, were you treated kindly? Did you empathize with Rachel when she could not conceive? Were you a calm, compliant girl, or did you ever rebel? What made you cry? How long did you live? Zilpah and Bilhah, no more than names. Zilpah and Bilhah, so much more than names.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think that they've summed it up well in Spill the Beans. So our question for Zilpah and Bilhah is, how might they have felt when they were handed over as slaves or servants? And when they then became enmeshed in a complicated web of emotional relationships, because they like Hagar did, buy into at some points about mothering these children. And they're unable to choose their own future. Indeed, they're unable to choose whose children they will carry. So what does that say in our text, that this is present here, these 2 girls who have this imposed on them? And we'll get you to talk about that because it's, again, another kind of cultural product of this era. We want you to think about, how does it strike you? Okay, how do we feel about Zilpah and Bilhah?
We felt very sorry for them.
Ended up with a good life, though. They would have had belonged to a family, and be much better than just being a slave.
But they were still slaves.
Yes.
And the decisions about the sons that they had would have been made by the real wives.
They had a place and they had a family and they had, yeah.
No. I'm afraid that I think they were taken away from their birth families. They were placed with this family that just decided how they were, what was going to be done with them and their bodies and their children.
Stolen children.
Yeah.
Stolen generation.
Yeah. So Jenny does have a point. It's like in medieval times when you put your daughter into a convent. You did that not because you thought she was specially religious, but you knew she'd be clothed and fed.
Yeah.
And children were sold from peasants and other places because they knew if they did that, they'd be clothed and fed. Again, we're dealing with a very different culture. And sometimes it was preferable. I'm not saying we know that in this case, we don't. But sometimes that was preferable. And that's why the Torah law has so many rules around slaves and debt and financial hardship and what you can and can't do and how long people can be slaves and when they can be freed and other things like that, because it was such a complex area.
There's a problem with that. If, for example, these two young girls were slaves from a different tribe, wasn't the aim of this to have the one culture, the one heritage, and those two girls, and so there would have been a mixture of cultures, blood and heaven only knows what else in the 12 tribes.
That would be true, except for the fact their biological knowledge was shite, Rosemary. They believed that children sprang from the father's sperm only and that all the woman contributed was an incubating vessel. So long as you've got the right father, it doesn't matter who the mother was.
Oh, right. So the mother could be from anywhere.
Yes, because they couldn't see ovulation where they could see semen. So they assumed there was nothing going on in the woman except you put the seed in her and it grew.
Is that why in Matthew, like Jesus is seen as a descendant of Joseph and not Mary, who's in direct line with
David,
Ruth and David?
It's Joseph that's just the direct line of Messiah in Matthew. But yes, Mary isn't. And what I imagine they probably still believed it by the 1st century simply because there was no way of them knowing what the woman was contributing in terms of DNA and genetics. This is a modern thing. So when you take that biological belief into account, Rosemary, you can see it doesn't matter. The mother's just a reciprocal.
So can I ask a question? Can I ask a question on the side?
Yeah, go on.
Please.
They sent me a message to say it's on its way.
I thought that in the 12 tribes of Israel, Ephraim was one. But obviously I'm wrong because it's not here. So where did Ephraim fit in?
I don't know where Ephraim fitted in. Because Benjamin isn't here either.
Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of one of the last. Are they the sons of Joseph? No, the sons of Benjamin.
I think they are actually. That's why they're not there. They're the grandchildren of Jacob. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Scene, right.
Oh, so that's where they come from.
That's where they come from.
Is another one of these, the grandfather's going to bless, you think the oldest, but he doesn't. He blesses the other. Yeah, they're Benjamin's children, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. But yes, that's right. I forgot.
Read your Bible, Rosemary, and find out.
Oh, I am.
All right, we'll move on to the character of Jacob now, and John's going to talk about him.
Oh, yes. Now we get to the good stuff. The production of an heir was an important focus in ancient societies. An heir for Jacob was necessary. It was necessary to fulfill the promise that the Lord made on oath to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. That is the phrase that's used in Deuteronomy, and it's also used in Exodus. It was a promise announced to Abraham, I will make of you a great nation, back in Genesis 12, reiterated in Genesis 22. It was repeated to Isaac in chapter 26, and then to Jacob in chapter 28, and again in chapter 32. So the story is insistent that throughout the sequence of events that are told, we are going to have an heirs to carry on the covenant relationship that Abraham made with God. Jacob is here under pressure to produce the heir. He finds that his wife Rachel is barren. Leah bears him 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel's maid Bilhah bore him 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. Leah's maid Zilpah bore him 2 more sons, Gad and Asher. Leah bore him 2 further sons, Issachar and Zebulon, and the daughter Dinah. And actually, in the break, Elizabeth and I were talking a little bit about the names, and each of these names, I've got an NRSV that's got notes explaining certain Hebrew words, and each of these names correlates with something in the story at the time. So Naphtali is the one that is the word for wrestling. So God remembered Rachel, the text says, and that initially it sounds like, oh, she's a kind of an afterthought. God's thinking, gosh, Rachel, I better do something. She hasn't produced anything yet. God heeded her and opened her womb. But of course, as Elizabeth has explained, reading the story, it's after she has used the mandrakes to actually convince, to move the story on. It's that particular scene that means that God remembers her and acts. She has wrestled with God. God's done more than just remembering her. God has actually said, right, I need to do something. She's serious. So Naphtali, and then Joseph is born. And so there's a full dynasty. And then after the family has left Haran and gone back to Canaan, the final son, Benjamin, is born, and that's where Rachel dies in giving birth. So it looks to us like a very fractured kind of organic family, 12 boys from 4 mothers, 2 of whom took 14 years and 1 deceitful trick for Jacob to secure. 12 sons, they're the ones that give their names to the 12 tribes of Israel through the ensuing saga. And those names occur again and again as part of that 12 tribes of Israel. So that's where the story will go. So Jacob's pretty crucial in this stage of the story. So knowing all that we know from what we've thought about before, the questions to consider are, how might Jacob have felt having his marriage plans turned upside down by his beloved father-in-law or father-in-law to be? How might he have felt after having Laban trick him? How might he have felt working for Laban for a second long period of 7 years? So we're asking you to do a little bit of empathy for Jacob at this point and get into his skin just for a few minutes.
All right, how did you go with Jacob? Anyone have any comments they wish to share about this trickster? Good question. I don't know. We're never told. You could probably try and work it out from the chronology with being him mooching around his mother's tents, but Yes.
The trickster became a person who got tricked.
But he did get tricked.
Mm.
But then he tricks his father-in-law again. So it's like a war of tricks. Yeah. One fools one, then the other fools them, and then they retaliate, and then someone does something else. So, yeah.
Then we should feel sorry for Laban because he loses his daughters, his grandchildren, and his household gods because Rachel nicked them.
Yeah, Rachel does nick them, and I'd say Laban thoroughly deserves it by that stage myself. But anyway, I think he's far worse than Jacob. Bill, you were going to say something.
Just saying that this is probably part of the ebb and flow of normal interactions and transactions in those days, that being tricked. We treat it with indignation today if we get tricked, but probably he wouldn't have probably had the same response because he's just been bettered in this occasion and he'll better somebody else in another occasion. So I don't think he wouldn't be too upset, I don't think.
They do have to end up striking a very formal truce at the end when Laban pursues Jacob when he takes his 2 wives and his children and his magically acquired sheep and goats and, does a runner. Because Laban comes after him and they build this heap of stones, which is got some meaning like, oaths have been made or something like that. And they need to swear to each other they won't harm each other. And God comes and warns Laban not to harm Jacob in a dream. There's a lot of dreams that goes on in Genesis, not just with Joseph. So there is obviously some harmful thoughts that go on, but I think on the whole you're right, because when Jacob's tricked into marrying Leah, he just does his other 7 years or however many length of time that is, and we don't know he complains until he gets the woman he wants. So, yeah, all in a day's work, fooling people.
Now, I would like to use the word love in this picture because love is a word that is very strong in the Bible, Old Testament and the New Testament. I think finally he wanted to have the girl whom he loved. So Leah was not loved. He wasn't the one that he desired to have as a wife, but he would have waited 14 years or whatever time it took to get the one he loved, which is good. It's a love story, and I like that part of it.
Yes. What Jacob's love exactly was is a bit probably up for debate, John, but it's a nice thought.
We felt that this story was probably written by the editors of The New Idea.
It could have been. It certainly could have been. The whole sort of saga of Jacob, in the patriarchs, yes. Because it's got a bit of everything, hasn't it? It's got manipulation, it's got, foolery, it's got magic, it's got all sorts of stuff. It's got household gods sitting under camel saddles, it's all there.
We've just got a few minutes to touch on Laban. Strangely, for a character in Genesis, we would think that this particular character has some dubious ethical standards.
All got dubious ethical standards, all of them.
Jacob had been instructed by Isaac not to marry one of the Canaanite women, but to take a wife from one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. So Jacob expresses a wish to Laban that he wants to marry Rachel. And this cartoon picture probably kind of is portraying that scene. Dr. Hendrickson Garraway, the scholar that I referred to earlier, notes that when we look at Laban's agreement carefully, we can see he never explicitly says yes to what Jacob is proposing. He never even mentions which of his daughters he is offering. He says, "It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me." He doesn't say, right, yes, let's shake on it or sign on the dotted line or anything like that. She says, it's a fairly vague, generalized proposal. Anyway, that's that scene. And I think this scene probably picks up where things got to a bit later. So the questions we had were to ask you to think about Laban. How might Laban have felt tricking his potential son-in-law? How might he have dealt with one daughter being chosen and one being rejected? How might he have spoken to each daughter about his plan? We've only got a few minutes, so we might just do a quick response about that, I think.
Yeah, we won't go into rooms.
He had a cunning smile in the first cartoon.
Yes, I think he's quite cunning.
Well, obviously, he didn't feel uncomfortable tricking his son-in-law because he did it, and and then he did it. Sort of played another game.
And he did it again when
Yes.
Jacob agrees that he'll have the speckled kids and the dark lambs. Laban's son remove all the speckled kids and dark lambs out of the flock.
Yeah.
So there's none left for Jacob to take. That's when Jacob gets his magic rods and puts them in the water trough and makes sure every lamb and kid born from that time on is either speckled or dark. So he gets his own back. But yeah, he just continues to trick him the whole way through. And when he's pursuing him, you have to think what Jacob's fate might have been nastier without Yahweh's intervention at that point.
Yes.
And they do come to an agreement that they're not going to kill each other, pretty much.
The genes would have come from Jacob's mother, how to trick.
Yeah, Rebecca has trickster genes. You're quite right. She does. Bearing in mind that trickery was much more admired in the ancient world than it is in our world. As Bill says, we get all indignant if we're tricked, but it was all in a day's work back then. And, it could bring you admiration, depending on who you tricked over what.
And Laban would have thought he was in the right because he was doing what was culturally
appropriate. Exactly. That's right. He was getting rid of the elder daughter before he got rid of the younger one, pretty much.
Yeah.
And he gets a double bride price. So, what's not to like on Laban's point of view?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know that he would have spoken to his daughters about his plan.
Oh, he would have told them what it was so they'd participate. But, yeah, I don't think there would have been a general discussion.
No.
It would have been, right, Leah, you'll stand there. And Rachel, you just shut up and cop it.
And wait.
And wait your turn. That's right. Pretty much.
Yep.
But there is a community expectation as well. If Laban had Rachel married first, the community around would have ostracized him. He would have said, why did you do that?
Yes.
Quite possibly. Yes.
Makes me think of name escaped me. In Pride and Prejudice, the really hoity-toity Darcy's aunt,
Catherine Lady Catherine.
Yeah, Lady Catherine. When Elizabeth says that they're all out, and she goes, "What? The younger are out before the elder are married?"
Yep. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, and she assumes Mr. Darcy will marry her daughter and unite the two estates. So she's planned that in ahead without consulting
long
anybody.
before that, when they were kids, apparently.
The two mothers put their heads together.
Yeah.
So it is similar.
All right, we better move to just briefly to the final question.
Yeah.
Which we won't have time to discuss tonight. So your homework will be to think about this and write a 2,000-word essay to submit by the beginning of the next session.
And are you going to mark it, John?
Oh, absolutely.
And which referencing system would you like us to use?
My days of marking are over.
And I won't be doing it, so I wouldn't worry if any of you need to worry about that.
So how does this story feed into the way we think about marriage or relationships today? That's one question. But probably the critical one, and
Yes.
the one that could be asked after each session that we do in this series, and indeed in many series, does this passage have anything to say to us today, apart from the fact that it'll make a good new idea story? How would you preach on this story so that it stands as the word of God for those gathered for worship? And that's the critical question.
Critical question.
If you're following the lectionary and you decide you're not just going to float straight into the gospel and see what Jesus said, but grapple with other passages, then how is this the word of God to those gathered for worship today? It's a really interesting question for which there's no simple answer. But hopefully by the discussions that we've been having tonight and each week, things emerge that can be hooks to start that process. At any rate, we wanted to finish with a brief reflection.
Like many before and many after, servants were coerced to produce heirs, to steer the patriarchy through periods of barrenness, sometimes acknowledged, more often not, sometimes provided for, usually cast out once they'd served their purpose. Heavily redacted genealogies make it difficult to trace the lines, so we lift up their names: Hagar, Bilhah, Zilpah, along with women through the ages, valued only as procreators, whose names are not spoken, whose bodies are not honoured, whose wholeness is not seen.
Next week, we're going to a wrestling match. No, it's not outside on the lawn outside the White House. It's
God.
it's long ago beside a river as Jacob continues his journey. So we're still with Jacob, and one of the scenes about Jacob that's really well known from Genesis.
Of course, it's very important because it's when he gets his new name.
Yep.